This presentation focuses on key aspects of requirements engineering scenarios and understanding a new code base. This agenda is designed to guide us through the importance of gathering and analyzing requirements, how scenarios can help define system behavior, and best practices for familiarizing ourselves with an unfamiliar code base. We will begin by discussing the lecture goals, emphasizing the importance of aligning development efforts with stakeholder expectations. Next, we will explore about the requirement analysis, a critical step to avoid project failures caused by poorly defined requirements. We will cover why a structured approach is essential to validate all aspects of requirements effectively. From there, we will move on to requirement steps, where we will compare heavyweight and lightweight approaches, highlighting how they apply to stable and dynamic project requirements. We will then delve into stories and scenarios, understanding how they help capture user-focused requirements and ensure that developers and stakeholders are aligned. We also look at user scenarios to understand specific user interactions, including steps, assumptions, and off-nominal behaviors. In this section, we will discuss about the developing scenarios with clients, explaining how to collaborate effectively to define functional requirements through examples like an online exam system. After that, we will review scenarios debrief, emphasizing the importance of addressing edge cases, preventing abuse, and ensuring robust error handling. Finally, we will talk about the orientation in new code base, breaking down how to get started with a new project, from understanding user interactions to exploring key code landmarks and using tools like version control to investigate bugs and make improvements. By covering these topics, this presentation aims to provide a comprehensive understanding of requirements engineering and practical tips for scenario development. The focus of this lecture is to highlight the importance of effectively gathering and analyzing requirements from stakeholders and understanding a new code base. Requirements form the foundation of any successful project. Without any clear and complete requirements, development team risk creating products that fail to meet client expectations. Alongside this, becoming familiar with an unfamiliar code base ensures smooth implementation. By focusing on these aspects, we can ensure better alignment between client needs and development efforts. Requirement analysis is critical because many projects fail due to poorly defined or misunderstood requirements. These failures led to incomplete solutions, unnecessary rework, and dissatisfaction among stakeholders. To avoid these issues, we need a structured approach to gathering and validating requirements. This ensures that all the aspects are accounted for, preventing unnecessary churn and reducing risks. A systematic approach ultimately leads to better project outcomes. Now let's move on to the requirements engineering steps. The steps in requirement engineering include elicitation and analysis, modeling and specification. A heavyweight approach focuses on documenting detailed document before starting the design. While this works for stable projects, lightweight approaches are better suited for dynamic environments where requirements are refined iteratively. This allows the team to focus on system-level clarity and adapt to changes. Both methods emphasize the importance of truly understanding and documenting client needs. Stories and scenarios are essential tools for capturing requirements in a way that clients and developers can relate to. Stories provide a big picture view by describing actors and their goals, helping aligning everyone's understanding. Scenarios dive deeper into specific interactions within the system, including user actions and outcomes. Agile user stories written in detail allow for prioritization and task breakdowns, ensuring that development stays on track. This method helps clarify requirements and avoid misunderstandings. User scenarios illustrate how a user interacts with the proposed systems. By focusing on specific examples, we can uncover functional requirements, analyze off-nominal behaviors, and identify potential challenges. Each scenario includes the purpose, the user, or in transaction being followed, assumptions about equipment, and the steps involved. Considering what could go wrong or change in the system state ensures that the design is robust and adaptable. This method clarifies expectations and highlights the areas for improvements. Developing scenarios with clients is an interactive process. It begins with choosing a viewpoint, defining the actors, equipment, and procedures, and then asking clarifying questions. For example, in an online exam system, we could describe how a typical student logs in, answers questions, and submits the exam. Detailing steps like authentication, uploading file, or saving progress helps refine functional requirements. By collaborating with clients during this process, we ensure that the scenarios align with their needs and expectations. Now, let's talk about the scenarios debrief. This is a helpful way to gather and understand the system's requirements, including how it will work. Scenarios show how the system responds in different situations. It helps us understand how the system will work and what the user will see on the screen. It helps us capture how the system will behave, including the user interface, but without focusing too much on design details. But obviously, for complex systems, we will need to create a lot of different scenarios to cover all the actions that the system can take. It's also important to consider off-nominal scenarios, meaning those situations that rarely happen but do could cause problems. For example, how do we undo an action like financial transaction? How do we handle inconsistencies like when there's a mismatch in inventory? We also need to think about the preventing abuse, such as student trying to submit an exam from two different browsers. And lastly, how the system will handle errors like recovering from database failure. Now let's talk about the orientation. When starting on a new project, this first step is to learn how to use the product itself. Most of the time, this can be done with a quick start guide. This helps us get a basic idea of how users interact with it, so we can better contribute to its development or improvement. After that, it's really important to read through the project documentation, which might include things like contributor guide, developer setup instructions, and a system design or architecture. Next, we need to figure out how to build and test the product. A good way to do this is by running and breaking a system to see how the things behave. While exploring the code, look for the key landmarks like where the execution starts or how the user interface works, and use the tracing statements to test your understanding. Tracing statements are basically the lines of the code added to a program to print a certain message or value at a certain point of code to help us to see the flow of the code. It's also helpful to read through tickets and change sets. Let's say we are working on a web application and we notice a bug in a login feature. To understand it, we should have to start by checking the project's issue tracker, where tickets are logged or recorded. We find a ticket that describes the bug and see who reported it and when. Next, we look at the change sets related to the login feature. Using the blame feature in our version control systems like Git, we can pinpoint the exact lines of code that were modified. This helps us understand who made the changes and what the intent was. Once we gather this information, we can make our own adjustments. After implementing the change, we can run the application to observe its behavior, checking if the login features work correctly or not. And lastly, we don't need to understand everything all at once. Instead, we can take our time to learn the basics, as we might start by figuring out how to add and delete items before trying to learn all the advanced features. Thank you for watching, and I hope this helps you in your software development journey.